Uh, can you guys hear me clearly?
Yep.
Okay. So, this is going to be incredible for me. So I had a script written out and got a loss incident. So I'm gonna be winging a little bit, so apologies if I seem a bit disjointed at the start.
Yeah, no worries. I understand.
Frustrating as it is. All right.
I went ahead and made a quick announcement to let people know that this is starting soon.
Okay, thank you, friend.
My pleasure.
Brilliant. If I'm not mistaken, do we not have a third speaker coming in shortly? I mean, I would hope so.
Yeah, we do.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm right here.
Haha. Hello.
Sorry, I forgot to
No,
have breakfast, so I kind of had to do that at the last minute.
you are completely fine. I've lost my script thanks to something going wrong with my text editor, so
Mm,
we all have our share of crises today.
yeah,
Don't worry about it.
yeah. I'm very excited, also very nervous. I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm a little bit nervous myself. That is primarily because I don't have my script, but I've done a bit of public speaking in the past. Just don't worry, just roll with whatever comes to your mind. You'll most likely be fine. Plus, the first episode or the first time a group of people talk, it's usually a little bit lopsided to begin with. It's nothing to stress about.
Mhm. Right, right.
Hmm. Which panel discussion room is reserved for this one? I'd like to have it open in a separate window.
Oh yeah, I'll open it up. Give my being a second.
It's all good. Gonna mute myself real quick. All right. Let's aim for either an audience of 20 or a start time of 8 minutes from now. As I say that, someone leaves.
Okay.
That's funny.
Damn.
So, all right, let me just get my CST
Sorry.
clock open so I don't worry. Let me just get my CST clock open so I don't seem like an idiot. It is currently 11:58 CST, so let's aim for 12:05 p.m. CST. Just so I can get some stuff set up on my end as well, and so we can ensure that we can see how much of an audience we get by then.
Okay.
Can I also confirm that recording is currently running? Hello?
I think Kiara is recording.
Okay, gotcha. Hold on. If right, yeah. Hello, Kira. I very briefly forgot that you don't need to be a speaker to record stuff.
Mhm.
It happens.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
it is fast approaching 5 a.m. here, so yeah, I might be a little bit eepy.
No worries. I understand completely.
Yeah, that's very fair. I'm gonna be so for real with you. I'm not usually awake by this time, so
That's
um
understandable.
it is noon where I am right now, so uh I
Oh yeah.
swear, yeah, I swear ever since I graduated, I've just like turned nocturnal. I'm trying to fix it, but
Look, take it from somebody who is naturally nocturnal but was diurnal during the working year. I mean, you will always revert to your natural state when you're not obligated to be up during the day. The best way to handle that is by finding reasons to be awake during the day, which is admittedly a major pain in the ass.
yeah, that's true.
We're just muted right now, and we're just waiting for everyone to get ready to start.
On that note, are we good to go?
Yeah, we are. It's just whenever everyone wants to start.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm ready whenever y'all are. So just let my being know, and I can go ahead and start with my little introduction.
All right. Everyone who's ready to speak, unmute yourself so we can do a bit of a ready count here. All right, that's 3 out of 5. This reminds me of the dungeon finder in World of Warcraft, where you're just waiting for like the last 1 or 2 members to
Oh yeah,
to mark as ready, and then you get knocked back into the queue every damn time.
yeah. I haven't done dungeons in World of Warcraft in like forever.
It's not
It's
worth it.
always
Not
so
worth it.
frustrating.
It's not worth it. I always just solo content in that game. I used to try to get involved in like the community aspect of WoW, but even when you're doing runs with like the same guild, it's just they never let you do like all of the content. It's always a mad dash to get those purple drops.
Oh yeah. Oh, and the farming the mounts, it's just a pain.
Never got the point of farming mounts, to be honest with you. Never
Yeah,
got the point.
I never got the blue proto drake. I never got whatchamacallit, what's that phoenix one that you get from like Kalthos? I never got
No.
that one.
Mm-mm.
Never got Lifebinder's Handmaiden.
Well, speaking of grinding for rare drops, when the Burning Crusade revival, like when Burning Crusade Classic came out, uh your boy got the Warglaives of Azeroth
Ooh.
on a human rogue. Probably one of the worst decisions, but
Oof.
all right. Um
I can go ahead and start if everyone's ready.
yeah. Will Kenna be speaking, or is it just Hearts of Frost who's also speaking?
I think Genna and Heart of Frost are here as moderators, but
Okay,
both of them can speak if they want to.
fair.
If need be, I will speak, but I'm mostly just going to stay muted because, well, one, I'm not a speaker, and two, I have my cat here, and he tends to get very talkative.
That's fair.
Meow, meow.
All right. Cool. Let's start.
Okay, many greetings, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Close Encounters of the Dragonkind podcast. This podcast was created to start discussions about draconity and the Dragonkind experience. I am your main host, Lunat. I'm a lyco-draconic werewolf with a deep spiritual connection to a divine, celestial draconian being by the same name. Upon this earth, I am indigenous Mesoamerican, two-spirit, and an avid photographer and artist. I've been hanging around the otherkind and Therian communities for a little over a decade now, creating community events, resources, and spaces. If other staff members want to introduce themselves, feel free to. I mean, that's staff members, hosts.
Right. I can go next if that's all right.
Sure, go for it.
All right. Okay. So hello there. I am Nimbus. I'm 19, and my pronouns are he, him, and it's. I'm a spiritual dragonkin with a past life as a Western mountain dragon, along with many other alter-human identities. I've been awakened for about 8 years and active in the community for around 6, but this is my first time doing anything big like this. Never done a podcast or any events or anything, but yeah. I'm from Texas and enjoy cosplay, writing, and marine biology, and I'm also a big fan of horror media. So yeah, that's me.
Hey, awesome.
All right then. Howdy y'all. I'm Alkura Wintermist, a psychologically identifying Arctic feathered dragon of the Western archetype. Where I come in regarding draconity and ultra humanity as a concept is, you probably guessed it, the psychology behind identifying, and more recently, community dynamics. I've been awoken for, I'd say, roughly 10 years, if not past or approaching at this point. Seeing the direction the community has headed, which is a wild change from previous times, I've decided to make the move to become properly involved once again. In my day-to-day life, I am a 20-something standard issue computer nerd with an ironic enjoyment of all things outdoors. There's not a whole lot more to say about myself.
Yeah, that's understandable. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. The topic of this podcast will be discussing and regarding the different kinds of draconity that are recognized by labels and terminology in the Dragonkind community, how they can be categorized, and how they are generally defined in the community, as well as the nuance behind labels, terms, and categorizing different types of draconity for the simplicity of categorization and explaining, that kind of thing. So first of all, what I have written down for the different kinds of draconity at this moment are spiritual draconity, psychological draconity, dragon-hearted identity, other linking identity, draconity experienced by non-dragons and how they are generally defined in the community, and draconity that does not fit into established labels. Do any other hosts want to comment on that?
Continue, please.
Okay. The other discussion points I have written down are how the community generally defines each experience mentioned above, how all labels mentioned can't always be categorized into spiritual or psychological depending on the experience. Wait, no. How all labels can be categorized into spiritual or psychological depending on the experience for easier categorization. Discussing that some experiences can't be placed under labels sometimes, even broad ones, due to individuals feeling like labels do not encompass their experience. Discussing the nuance regarding labels and why they don't have to be important. Discussing the issue of coining too many terms. And discussing that one does not need to use labels if they do not want to. On to the first point, though, spiritual draconity, psychological draconity. Spiritual draconity and psychological draconity are generally considered the most common types of draconity in the community. They're the most recognized labels, and it is easy for most dragonkind to identify themselves as either spiritual or psychological, depending on their experiences and how they feel the labels fit with them. For my being personally, I identify my draconity as both spiritual and psychological. My draconity has had a considerable effect on my psychology, my human mind, and yeah, just my psychology in general. Though there are also a lot of spiritual aspects of my draconity, like living a concurrent life, having a deep spiritual connection to Lunat, my true draconian self, and just other spiritual aspects of my identity. So I consider myself both. I do not fall under dragon-hearted identity or other linking. I do fall under draconity experienced by non-dragons because my werewolf stereotype at Narok identifies as draconic despite not being a dragon. That's really all I have written down for that part on my script.
Fully understandable. A bit of a comment I have on that is what I have personally found, and mind you, I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who doesn't experience spirituality, but I do find that for the vast majority of spiritual identifiers, there is a very, very strong psychological aspect which follows. Considering that, I guess, under spiritual ideas, the mind and soul are strongly linked, I would have to assume this is the general case. What say you on that?
Yeah, I agree fully, actually. Not only because it's been my personal experience, though a phenomena like draconity or otherkinity is bound to have some effects on an individual's life and psychology, whether that be in subtle ways or whether draconity or otherkinity changes an entire person's view of the world and their psychology.
I couldn't have said it any better. Precisely, precisely. And that is also another important factor to consider. Regardless of how you identify, the non-human experience is obviously wildly different from the norm and will, generally speaking, once again, massively shape your worldview and how you may approach certain situations and deal with them. Nimbus, do you have anything to say on this?
Well, yeah, I agree completely, and because speaking from my experience, while my draconity is mostly spiritual, it of course does have effects on my psyche, as you guys mentioned, and uh like and also I feel like some of my neurodivergency also has an effect on my draconity. Like, because I am autistic, I'm not going to behave like the quote unquote average human, so to speak. And and that's actually sorry, but my point is I feel like but my point is, you're right. I feel like there are, even if your identity is spiritual, it is going to have effects on your psychology. And yeah.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Can I add to this?
Sure.
Please?
I do identify as spiritual dragonkin, but I do also believe that it has some psychological aspects to it, because for me to be able to experience this within a human brain, I need to have something happening. Of course, I'm only talking about my own experience, but I think it's actually very captivating to think about it this way. And even though I don't quite understand it fully yet, I'm still like looking into it because it is curious.
Yee, that's understandable. Uh, yeah, if we weren't starting on the panel, we can do like a 20-minute Q&A or whatnot. Okay, let's see what else I have on my script. Did you want to say something?
Oh, no. So, I was just agreeing. Apologies.
Okay, no worries. See, the next thing I have on my list is how the community generally defines each experience mentioned above.
This is a bit of a contentious one, isn't it?
Yeah, because on one hand, the community defines things in specific ways, yet there are also
Yeah. Is it
generally accepted definitions. Go ahead.
Yeah.
is it okay for me to run into this one with guns firing?
Go for it.
I have to say, look, I understand I wouldn't say importance. I understand the appeal behind labeling experiences and defining experiences in order to make things easier to understand, but even going down to the level of the human psyche, let alone whatever else is going on here, the condition of the human slash draconic slash whatever condition is always going to be unique to each to each individual. I don't think you can define a lot of these experiences in umbrella terms. And whilst the attempt of doing so is noble to try to simplify things, this isn't a simple concept we're tackling either.
Mhm.
Comments?
Oh, go ahead, Kina.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I do agree. Like it's great to label things and it's incredibly useful, but something as like unique and like difficult to understand as psychology and the human mind or just brain in general will pretty much just be impossible. We'll never be able to truly like define every single aspect of every single person's experience. It's still useful because we get to find each other and have easier conversations, but sadly, it is also impossible to fully realize.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. I if I could put my input, if you don't mind, I'd like to say something on this as well.
Sure, go for it.
Please.
So while I do what so I'm sorry. I
It's okay, no
um
worries. Take your time.
yeah, sorry. Sometimes my brain just crashes and um but what I'm trying to say is have it is I agree. Putting everything into a little box or label can be harmful and doesn't work for everyone. And but also I'm someone who likes labels just for the sake of organization and like being able to describe myself better. Really, it just depends on it just varies from being to being on what kind of thing you prefer, you know? Some like labels, some don't, and both are totally okay.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody on the spectrum, I entirely concur with this. Labels are a godsend, for a lack of better words. But in this specific use case, I guess something important to consider is figuring out the balance between how broadly we can use labels and at what point can we determine labels cannot be used, if I'm making sense here.
I get what
Yeah.
you mean.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, labels, they're really only there for those who want to use them. And really, like you all said, not every experience can be encompassed under labels.
Mhm.
Some individuals feel that labels don't fit for them, like for certain aspects of my draconity. Personally, labels don't always encompass my experience. So I just attempt to explain my experience rather than define my experience under certain labels. Because sometimes it's too complicated. Sometimes it just doesn't fit on any other label. I'm sure some feel the same way though. And that's my experience with labels. They're useful at times though. They don't encompass every single aspect of my experience.
Yes, yes. Very well put. I'm very much the same way. I tend to not label a lot of my alter human experiences too detailed. Like, of course, I still do not I mean, I say of course as if this is like something everyone does. It's just like it's natural to me. So that's why I say it like that. I use labels like, you know, otherkin, Therian, etc. But um I don't I don't really tend to like there are I know there are very specific words for specific types of alter humanity, and I just don't really like other than like psychological and spiritual and like sublabels like Therian, Theriomythic, Paleotherian, etc. I don't really feel comfortable using those, but it's different with my gender identity where I use a lot of xenogenders, and it just like for me, gender is more of like a performance, while alter humanity is just who I am, and I prefer to keep who I am to be fairly simple, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's understandable. That's
For
another
sure.
thing too, like I forgot to mention this experience though. Yeah, otherkinity and draconity can absolutely have an effect on gender. It has for my being because my draconic self has no gender whatsoever. So that definitely reflects on my being upon this earth.
Mhm.
I identify as two spirit though, so I would say both my indigenous heritage and my draconity affect my gender identity, though that's a discussion for another day.
That's really cool. I I'm kind of like, yeah, so I primarily identify as a transgender man, but I'm also non-binary, and in my dragon life, I was male presenting, though I didn't really care much for gender and didn't really like it just did not matter to me at all. So I was very apathetic towards it as a dragon, but and that's kind of care and that it's not really it's kind of like it's more for me nowadays it's more about presentation than anything. So I I feel like I feel like it's I completely lost that sentence. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, no worries. I do the exact same thing. I understand.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah.
Do not stress.
Yeah. It's more like because I feel like my draconity kind of affects me being a trans man. So like I don't know, it just feels more natural to be masculine to me, or like masculine and neutral. So that it helps me feel like okay, I'm gonna just start a new sentence and I'm just gonna start a new sentence and stop trying to salvage that one.
No worries, I understand.
Like
Yep.
I remember when I first awakened, I still identified as cis because I was very young and didn't really understand gender stuff. But even then, I was like, huh, that's weird. I wasn't a girl back then. Still kind of don't feel like one now, but like, and then after I discover, and then I realized, oh man, I can just straight up identify as a dude again. That's cool. That's like so just gender and my draconity are both pretty um intertwined, I would say.
Hmm.
So, because like we kind of have different views on gender than we kind of had different views on gender than humans did because it was less like male, female, and then other things. It was more just like I don't know how to describe this. So gender is of course a spectrum for humans as well, but it was also like more widely accepted as being a spectrum for us, and it didn't really like what you were born as didn't really matter. It was mostly just like I don't know. I just
It's okay. I understand what you mean
yeah,
completely.
my ADHD meds today too. I don't know why this is happening.
It just happens sometimes. That's just a thing with
Yeah,
ADHD. I get it also.
yeah,
In
dragon.
regards to yeah, in regards to how draconity affects gender, it's kind of the same with how it affects psychology. Gender is more based on identity and how you feel rather than your physical sex. At least that's been my experience. I imagine for a lot of dragonkind or draconic identifying individuals, their draconity or other kinity in general may affect their gender identity or how they view their gender because, well, gender is kind of a psychological thing, so I imagine it has a lot of influences, as it does on psychology.
Yeah. Might I might I might I confirm on your statement? I've met a lot of our kind, and I've interacted with a lot of our kind over the past 10 odd years, and you are pretty much dead on there. Um there is definitely a, like, how do I exactly describe this? Consciously or not, we all want to become closer to what we identify as, because I mean, for lack of better words, and to place the obvious as bluntly as possible, um we are what we identify as, therefore we will emulate whatever that involves, be
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, be that our lifestyles, the way we eat, the way we walk, the way we perceive ourselves, all of that.
Mm-hmm. That's understandable.
Mhm. Yeah. Is it on the topic of like of older humanity and like gender type stuff? Is it okay if I say something a little bit controversial?
This is a pretty mature crowd, so yes, go for
Okay.
it.
So something I've noticed, and a lot of people don't like to say it, but as someone who is both transgender and otherkin, I've noticed a lot of similarities between there are a lot of parallels and similarities between being transgender and being otherkin. Like, of course, they're not the same thing, but but I've found that if you're otherkin, there's a good chance you're not 100% cisgender either, you know? Because it just, as mentioned before, your non-human identity will probably affect your psychology and how you view yourself and your identity and stuff. So I've just noticed that uh they're not the same experience, but they are similar experiences. And I feel like even if you are cisgender and alterhuman, you can understand the transgender experience if you don't identify as human, because it's like not identifying with the body you were given. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
While I mostly agree with what you've mentioned, I would be a bit cautious about towing the line between gender and species.
Oh
Yes,
yes, of course.
they do share a lot of similarities, but there are also there are also some important differences to note.
Mhm.
Um it's kind of as we've seen in recent times, the whole idea of identifying as ultrahuman has been weaponized against the queer community.
Yes.
So
uh,
uh, as
yeah.
much of a pain as it is, we do have to make sure to make that distinction.
Yes.
But definitely identifying as something that doesn't show externally is is certainly a shared experience, and it definitely does go below that surface level, but probably not in similar directions after a certain point, if you catch my
Mhm.
drift.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, I'm not, you put it into words much better than I could. Like, as I was saying, they're very different communities. I was just meaning to say that it's interesting how we share a couple similarities. Just,
Oh,
and
oh, sure.
I only brought this up because I'm both transgender and otherkin, and my experiences with how I experience my gender and species are um not not the same, but not the same, of course, but kind of similar, because I already mentioned why, but yeah. So,
It's
but it is really shitty how people will say, "Oh, what if it is?" I have seen people say bullshit like, sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, you can swear, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Probably should have asked that earlier.
It's okay.
Um, but yeah, I have noticed I I have noticed there being an uptick in people being like, "Oh, if my daughter wants to identify as a boy, then what's stopping my kid from identifying as a cat? You know, it's just that's like it's it's
The
just
old
very
liberal
complicated,
question.
and yeah, it's very complicated, and there's really just no way to win, and it's just, you know, it's a lot of
Mm,
bad stuff. But we're not here to talk. We're
yeah,
I'm sorry for
and
bringing the mood down.
that's okay. That's okay. I would like to say though, considering there is definitely, as we've just spoken about, there does seem to be a close tie between alter humanity and gender. And coming to think of it, I don't think that link has been discussed quite often. That's something I would love to see get researched more and discussed more. I mean, it's nowhere near a foreign concept, but I really haven't seen any material on it, even though I've tried to look for it, like in previous times.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see this discussed a lot more. In my experience, people feel like they have to be incredibly cautious when talking about the similarities between gender and species, like identities. And it's very understandable because, you know, being otherkin has been used to as a weapon against the queer community, but
For
also
sure.
just because of past anger from the queer community. Um, and like it's I don't know, it's just saddening because I think there could be some really cool conversations that could go on with this. And I don't see why we should be afraid if everybody is respectful and understands the differences between those two facets of identity.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm. Which is definitely it. The first stage there will be to establish that respectful ground. There is still work to be done there, but I won't say anything further on that currently.
No worries, I understand. I forgot to elaborate on how like spiritual draconity and psychological draconity are generally defined in the community. As
Go for it.
far as I know, spiritual draconity is defined as draconity or draconic identity that deals with more metaphysical or paranormal concepts like past lives, concurrent lives, dragon souls, anything that's metaphysical, really. And psychological draconity is generally defined as draconity or draconic identity. Yeah, draconity or dragonkind identity that is more based in one's psychology rather than spiritual concepts. I hope I got that right, though that's just generally what I've seen the two concepts described as in the community.
For the most part, yes. What I generally like to say is apologies. A little bit of hay fever coming on here.
It's okay.
It's a it's a real game of Dragon Soul versus Dragon Brain. Um,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
understandable.
yeah, as somebody who's predominantly interested in the psychology of draconity, I really should have more to say on this right now.
Oh, it's
Um,
okay.
yeah. Does anyone else have anything to say on this? For the moment, whilst I collect my thoughts.
No, I pretty much I just yeah, you two summed it up pretty well, and uh I the world of spiritual draconity is really interesting because I've after joining this specific circle with you guys and like the Celestial Spire and stuff, I've seen so many different ways that spiritual draconity is experienced that I didn't even know existed, and it's really cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I enjoy reading the messages and experiences of everyone in the server.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I love learning about other people's experiences and how that sort of thing affects them. So yeah.
Yeah, that's understandable.
So a question. So actually, a question for you, Luna, and anybody else who may have input on this from a spiritual perspective. Um, Forgive me for my ignorance here. As Are there many cases of, for lack of better words, acquired draconity? So something that is spiritual and like something you may identify as spiritually, but wasn't exactly there from birth or wasn't felt from birth and was picked up later on. If that question makes sense. Apologies again.
No, I get what you mean. I imagine it's possible. I imagine like someone could develop some kind of psychological draconity later in life, either entirely randomly or as a result of having a very substantial experience with dragons or identifying with dragons. I know dragon-hearted identity can sometimes occur later in life for the same reasons. I've noticed some spiritual dragonkin experience like what's the word, walk-ins
Yeah,
of
soul
draconic
walk-ins.
entities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's definitely possible to like not be born draconic and instead have draconic identity or dragonkind identity appear later in life. It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, go on.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, while my draconity has been something I've experienced for my whole life, I've certainly seen a lot of people who have gained it later in life, such as like the best example, I think a good example of like something I've seen is like plural systems who like introject or split off or however else they gain draconic headmates, like uh you know, that's like something that, and that's something that may affect just that specific alter or headmate or maybe the whole system. And I should probably mention that I'm mentioning this because I am part of a system and have a draconic headmate myself, and I am also one of the draconic headmates. So um that's something I've noticed. So that's uh yeah, that's I'm gonna just take a break from speaking for a second. Did you
That
guys
No
go
worries.
ahead?
that is that is completely okay. I mean, I always like hearing about cases of acquired draconity or acquired identity because from a psychological perspective, a lot of the workings, like a lot of my theories, and I say theories explicitly in a manner of I am not a qualified psychologist slash psychiatrist in any way, shape, or form. But to continue on that, I like hearing about acquired cases a lot because most of my I guess ideas and assumptions from a psychological perspective pertain to things existing from birth, i.e., the wiring of the brain itself being biased in order to induce certain to basically induce this sensation of altered humanity.
Yes, mhm, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Another thing, another case of acquired alter humanity. I don't know if this is necessarily a thing that happens with draconity specifically, but another thing I've noticed is like another cause I've seen for particularly Therians, since it's easier for it to happen is imprinting. Like if someone if someone grew up with like say a lot of dogs in their house, then they may have an alter human identity as a dog they because that's what they grew up with. I don't know how that would work
Yep.
with draconity since
It would. So Nivis, thank you for bringing this up. This is actually one of the this is actually like one of the only sort of acquisition style situations that I have a keen interest in. So this ties into this ties into the neurodiversity to a fairly great extent. I believe there was an entire segment in othercon in 2022 on it too. So from the perspective of dragons, let's say, I mean, the Dragonology book series, media involving dragons, it doesn't have to be a physically present creature. But yes, with Therians, as you said, it would be a lot easier because those are in fact Earth-based animals that we have a relatively defined scientific perspective on their behaviors and whatever else it is that they do. But imprinting can happen from anything and everything. That's probably why we get people identifying as, pardon me, Furbies at times. If it's there, and if your mind is prone to imprinting, the possibility is always there, and I find that fascinating personally.
It is very fascinating. Now that you mention it, it is very possible that that part of my draconic identity does come from imprinting, because I do recall this one. Do you guys remember that one dragon mockumentary? I think it was put out by Animal Planet.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
that
yeah.
one. I think that particular mockumentary shaped a lot of my draconity and really like my view on dragons. Of course, like of course there are very many different kinds of draconity, and that documentary is very much not the be all end all authority on dragons, but it was very important to my specific identity. Also, I will be right back. I need to light a candle real quick because I just want my room to smell nice. I'll be right back.
Okay. Fire Dragon, welcome. Sorry, I
Hi.
probably shouldn't bust in here. Luna, did you want to introduce this person?
Oh yeah, Zephyrus or Jersey is one of our staff members.
All right. Brilliant. Apologies. I thought this was I thought it was somebody who potentially wanted to raise a point or ask a question. Sorry about that.
I do as well.
Ah.
So I know I want to keep this short because I know that usually when I open my mouth on this topic, someone comes after me in my DMs. But I want to introduce myself first. My name's Fire Dragon. Some people have seen me around. Right now in life, I work. Well, I'm not working at the moment, but usually I work in the mental health industry. I've had a lot of experience. I've been working in it since about 2018. I have my degree in psychology. So, and I work very closely with people with mental health problems, and I'm a certified peer specialist. So one of the things that I kind of like to put in here is that even like when I was studying stuff is I have an issue a little bit talking with psychology and otherkindism, only because of people throwing around certain terms and talking about certain things. I'm sorry about the birds. I have a bird
okay.
right here. So and they're celebrating at the moment. And it kind of bothers me from my clinical standpoint when people kind of throw around terms and stuff in psychology when it feels like there's not a lot of just stuff being like there's not a lot of backing behind it. So like if I go into a like physics thing and I just talk about like the armchair physics that I know from just on the surface instead of actually having all of that extra hands-on experience and knowledge, and it conflicts with me personally because I work very closely with people who have mental health issues, and I think this was a discussion earlier is that there's a lot of what's the name? There's a lot of stigma. There we go. With people who have mental health illnesses, and a lot of it is that people don't completely understand people who have mental illness and neurodiversity and other things of the sort. I myself have mental health issues, and neurodiversity things as well. And it gets really sticky when, for me, when we start associating psychology with other kindism, because then in some ways I feel that it's only hurt people who have mental health issues. And I'm not talking about people who have other kin issues and are also mentally ill, but like just the mentally ill population at large, that it increases that stigma. And I'm just putting it as like a thing. I feel like we have to be careful about when we start mixing psychology with all of these things, and that if you're ready to bring something to the table, you should be ready to back it up with actual things. And it's caused me a lot of issues because, you know, if I didn't go into psychology and if I didn't choose the path that I did, perhaps I'd be like, oh yeah, a psychology, another kidism, and all that together, we could just start doing things and that'd be cool. But personally, it bothers me. I have this issue where it's like I can't just throw around stuff and feel good about it because I know that it hurts a population. When you start saying stuff like imprinting, that's not something that is observed with people. That is something that's strictly with avians, specifically with ducks and chickens and such. It's not something that we've ever observed with other mammals and stuff when we go into comparative psychology. So, like, and I've heard this stuff before, but I feel like people just kind of use this stuff to kind of fit their thing. And I feel like instead of doing that, maybe focus on making new terms and making something that's new and separate from stuff that's already established and studied and concrete, because you don't want to muddy up the waters with it. And I know that there's been plenty of things where if you want to go into how this affects people with mental health illness, that if people start saying things like they're other kin or whatever, and people assume that that's part of a mental illness, and then you got other stuff that makes it look kind of bad, you're just kind of hurting a community. You know what I mean? So
No worries. Yeah, I understand.
and maybe it's because I'm very scientific minded, but keeping it separate or making your own thing for it is important. Words do matter, and when you're dealing with a population that is often misused and underappreciated and just taken advantage of, you don't want to hurt that population more. It's kind of like people who are trans, right? And there was this whole thing, I don't remember if anyone remembers, that people who are trans didn't like the other kin community because they thought it was just kind of a mockery and making it harder for them to get the things that they need. Right? So that's kind of how I feel when it comes to people putting psychology and stuff in mental health. And that you're kind of muddying up the waters a little bit. And like I said, I'm not saying this to kind of start something or people coming after me or anything. I'm just simply saying this as somebody who works hands-on in that realm, has studied in that realm, exists in that realm, and continues to help fight for people. Because when I'm not online and doing this stuff, my main goal is to help people deal with their lives and get over stigmas, and also spread the word about mental illness to the greater population and help support those who are suffering. So it's almost, sometimes it almost feels counterproductive. So that's kind of what I'm saying. I don't know, a little bit of the chats here.
Yeah, no worries. I understand what you mean. There's definitely a lot of nuance to the subject, and I have severe mental illness, so I can understand where you're coming from.
Well, none of us mean to reduce. None of us mean to be reductive or oversimplifying any of these experiences, and I respect everything you have to say on this matter. However, we're not exactly just throwing out terms here. We're not exactly just spewing out things here. We are, a lot of what is being brought up here is based off other people's lived lived experiences. Now I myself do have a fairly scientific mindset, or at least I'd like to think I do. However, the simple fact of the matter is there hasn't been enough research done on a lot of what alter humanity consists of. So sometimes all we have are lived experiences to rely off as, for a lack of better words, a very soft form of research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would like to offer my sincerest apologies if I misused terms, or perhaps like just didn't understand them, but I did not mean to conflate two different things, if that makes sense. Like I did not mean to. I was speaking on behalf of like things that I have seen other people say in regards to their alter humanity and their neurodivergency. So yeah, and I would also like to mention that I have a couple mental disorders myself, and it is not my wish to make things more difficult for other neurodivergent people. And I would just like to say I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm not coming after anybody. I just, it looks like we're getting hung up on some things in the discussion. I only chose imprinting as one of the things because that seems to be a very popular way to describe stuff. But I didn't mean imprinting in general. There's tons of terms and stuff, and it's not you specifically. When you start to muddle with psychology and otherkindism, not everybody is going to be as smart or informed as you are. You got like these like kids that are coming around thinking they can just throw around terms and stuff, and all of a sudden it's like they're the Carl Jung of otherkindism psychology, and it's not. And that's what I mean. It's not necessarily that I'm not coming after anybody for whatever they do. You guys are going to do what you want at the end of the day, and that's okay. And you're allowed to feel and think whatever feels comfortable to you. I'm not here to police you. I'm just here to raise a point that when you go into these things, you need to be mindful of the wider picture and the bigger things at large. I think that's my main thing. For me personally, I would never, but that's my path because it's just working hands-on. I can't do it personally.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I understand. I mean, you work with mental health, you work in psychology, so I can definitely understand your viewpoint. I mean, I've never worked in psychology before. I just only have experiences with mental disorders, so I don't necessarily have the experience that you have. And I do respect your viewpoint. I think that making new terms instead of using psychological terms can be useful in that sense.
I think so. I think that would be a good way to do it. Or at least if you're gonna go into these things, you need to be very well informed on all of that, and you need to just like don't just throw stuff around because people just kind of do that, you know. And
Yeah.
it's stressful whenever I read it, and like I said, I'm not here to make any kind of claims, but you can't just throw shit around, you know.
No,
Moss
I
says, what
understand.
word would you use to describe the phenomenon? You know, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sorry about the birds.
It's okay. I enjoy the birds.
Maybe you could just go with mental kin or wherever. I don't really know for that. And for me, like when I was dealing with my draconity and dealing with that, because of how scientific I am, it was difficult to accept because, you know, I'm a very scientific mind. I mean, you know, I don't want to do a lot of hocus pocus, but in the end, for me, it was like the most rational thing to accept was the most irrational thing. I feel like I have to make up a word for this because I see it a lot because I'm very into like cryptozoology and things of that sort. When it comes to people seeing like these people saw something that was weird, it was creepy. People who are woodsmen, people who are police officers, people who are trained to know. I know I'm getting off topic, but I swear it goes back. But there are people who are like, I saw this creature. It looked weird. It was nothing I've ever seen. And people who say this, sometimes there are people who aren't credible, but a lot of the times there are people who say they saw these weird things. And they're like, I'm a police officer with someone years who would never put their reputation on the line for saying something they saw. Or people are like, I'm a woodsman. I've been out in the woods since I was 12 years old. I've never seen anything like this. But then they just divulge it into it was an owl. Of course, it was like all cryptid sightings are owls. Everything unexplained is an owl. But you see how it doesn't make sense when you try to rationalize it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
And going back to when it comes to me accepting that I was not human, it was like it doesn't make sense to rationalize something that can't be rationalized. And you have to, for me, it was like I have to accept that it's not something that's in the realm to be understood. And I just kind of let it exist as it is. And that's just kind of how I put it. I know we're getting a little off topic, but that's kind of how I see it with things. And maybe it's seeing it as a different category than that, and that's something that's weird and strange and different, but it's in its own league, you know?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I understand completely. I'm reminded of, I hope I don't open a huge can of worms here by saying this, though. I'm reminded of how phantom limbs are described in the otherkind community and how phantom limbs are described in the medical community. And there has been some discourse about whether phantom limb is the right usage for other kin who have not lost limbs in the physical life. They have suggested using alternative terms, though, regardless of what you think, it's always good to be informed on how phantom limb syndrome is, what should we call it? How it is recognized in the medical community, how phantom limb syndrome is experienced by amputees and their experiences with, what should we call it? With losing a limb, the stigma behind it. It's oftentimes, I don't want to say all the time, though oftentimes it is a very different experience than non-human phantom limbs or the other terminology, supernumerary phantom limbs. So it's always good to be informed about psychological terms, how they affect people who are non-other kind who identifies them, and like how it's used in the other kind communities. So I do understand what you're saying. There's a lot of nuance to be discussed, and it is always important to be informed on how a term is used psychologically and scientifically and how it is used in other senses. It's just always good to be informed and always good to recognize nuance. That's just my point on it.
I think that's good. And Moss, I did say something. I said maybe mental kin might be a little bit better. So I did address your question. I don't know if you heard me, but I did say that. And like I said, I'm not here to fight anybody on it. I'm just here as somebody who lives in both worlds of dealing with being otherkin and being a dragon and being weird and being strange, but also literally having my life outside of the internet and dealing hands-on with people that and going through discipline and existing with that. I know I don't have my master's, but I know enough at this point to kind of like see it through. And I know that's kind of rare in this community. I don't think there's a lot of people in this community that have for real psychology based backgrounds that add input onto this. But that's why I wanted to add my own thoughts and feelings on this. So maybe we can get more discussions talking and get you guys thinking and be mindful. And that's it. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to disturb anybody. That's not my task. So that's it.
This entire dialogue is truly a testament to how we need more professional insight into all of this.
Yeah, you provide a different, unique viewpoint on this, and I think it's important to bring new viewpoints to discussions and well, discuss those differing viewpoints and bringing new nuance to discussions. I think it's very important. So I definitely appreciate you providing your viewpoint.
Thank you. Maybe it'll be a panel next time because I'm not prepared. I've been very scatterbrained, but there's a lot when it comes to discussing psychology, mental health, and even going into otherkinity. And we can even go into those little avenues, like you said, when it comes to like dealing with astral limbs and phantom limbs and such like that. So there's a lot going on there.
I would thank you for your input, and it's very helpful to have someone who like actually knows what they're talking about in terms of psychology to like, I'm not saying the other people here don't know what they're talking about. I just mean someone who's like more well versed in it than the average person, you know?
Right. I'm glad I can help with that. It makes me happy that I actually have that insight to give to the community at large, so we can problem solve and come to good alternatives and good endings. That's all what we want, right?
Right. Also, do you think we could come back to talking? Is it possible that we could come back to talking about the phantom limbs thing later?
Later, yeah, sure.
Yes. I just want to like remind myself because I have a couple thoughts on that I would like to share.
Yeah, I understand completely. Yeah, we can definitely discuss that later on.
Yes. I don't want to like derail more than I have, so.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
I don't, honestly, with how things have gone so far, I don't think there's such thing as derailment as much as the introduction of things that many of us here may not have considered previously. I am fascinated and slightly shaken, and I love it.
Yeah, that's understandable. I get what you mean. Yeah, we can definitely have a discussion on like phantom limbs and the nuance behind either using new terms, creating new terms, or just recognizing how the different experiences are. There is a member in the Celestial Spire who does suffer from phantom limb syndrome in the medical sense, and they have very, very interesting, valuable input on that subject. So if we want to discuss, I suggest going to the Celestial Spire because, again, we have an individual who knows the experience of phantom limb syndrome in the medical sense, and their input is very valuable. So again, Celestial Spire, if we want to do discussion about that. Not only because I feel that it's important to have that view, though also to include them in the discussion, since it does involve them as someone who actually experiences that medically. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes, that is a very good idea. I am not someone who experiences phantom limbs in a medical sense, I just meant my thoughts in terms of my thoughts on phantom limbs in the otherkin sense. But it is very valuable to have someone who experiences the medical definition. I agree. I just gotta write that down for myself to remember later.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Don't worry, I am writing it down as well. I need to hear about that.
I understand. I'm looking through everything on my list right now to see what else we can discuss. I'm going to elaborate on that.
I'd also just like to very quickly say, unfortunately, Fire Dragon, was it? Or did they have a name that they also went by? Apologies.
You can just call me Zephyrus.
Hello. Oh, you're still here.
Yeah.
You're still here, Zephyrus.
I muted because of the birds.
No, I think I think it's because the panel is on a separate monitor to my notes and the chat. So anyway, I don't think we'll get time to discuss this today, as that additionally you mentioning that you weren't quite prepared, but at a future point, if you are prepared, I would love to have you back to basically discuss your thoughts on, I'm going to use what we're probably considering an antiquated term going forward, psychological identification, just simply because I see it as a fundament to the way I conduct myself. So
Right.
I would absolutely love to pick your brain about that at some point, and obviously record it because
We can always do
Um,
that for another Close Encounters of the Dragonkind episode. We can definitely do that.
I meant that exactly. Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now,
I don't mind whatsoever.
yeah, I'm probably going to be silent for the next few minutes while I collect my thoughts on a couple of things. Others, please speak.
No worries, I understand.
I'm okay. I like to talk, so it's fine.
Others, go ahead and speak because I have to mute for a second. I have to take a call. 1 sec.
It's New Year's Eve. Anyone got plans?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
Everybody got plans for New Year's Eve? Ready
Uh,
for New Year?
I'm in the morning after.
Oh my god.
oh, cool.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
My only plans for New Year's Eve is being at the Draconic Summit, so yeah.
Fair. This is also my plans, but after things are like over, I may like have a sleepover with a friend. I don't know. So
Alright. That sounds like fun. I got nothing else. I'm debating on going out and doing some more dancing, but I'm tired. I don't know. I got mom's making food, so that's pretty exciting.
nice,
It's like snacks and stuff.
nice.
I'm not looking forward to the fireworks. I'm hoping this development doesn't shoot off any, but like our stupid fucking neighbors does that.
Yes, fireworks are the bane of my existence.
I agree. I
Fireworks are-
cannot handle them.
Fireworks are pretty for my being. I'm just like, too loud. It is too loud.
Yes, I agree. They're very pretty, but I don't like the noise.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's the noise. I used to be okay with fireworks, like when I was a kid, and that was fine. But now, like I can't handle it. It just sends me off into like fight or flight mode so bad. I think it's because not the limbic system. Maybe it is the limbic system. My fight or flight's always on. It doesn't turn off. So like any kind of like weird noise, I always get like ready to run away like a deer. So
Yeah,
it's
same.
like when fireworks go off, it like smashes that button, and it's like the absolute worst.
Yeah, I can very much relate to the fight or flight being like a deer thing. I'm very easily startled by loud noises, which is kind of weird and ironic since I really love horror and like and don't actually mind like jump scares and scary movies, but like if I hear a door open and I'm not expecting it, I will jump like 2 feet into the air.
Me too. Like something happened. I was taking care of my birds, and I have like this suction cup perch. I just cleaned, and I put it back on where it needs to go, and it fell, and I like touched the ceiling. And then I didn't know where it came from, and I was looking all around because, like, oh my god, what if I'm being attacked? There's someone outside, and then I found out it was just that, and I was like, no, it's just silly.
Yeah, something my best friend likes to do is, by the way, I'm okay with her doing this. I think it's funny. Something she likes to do is just like jump scare me by yelling, and it's very funny. I think it's hilarious because I always like jump like 2 feet into the air and like screech. It should be recorded someday. I think I would do numbers on TikTok for that reaction, but yeah.
I feel that. I did something. There was something that popped up. I did want to mention. That psychological kin will invoke association with psychological illness. Not for everybody, not really, but for people who are outside looking in, that's typically something that they would see, since you're already identifying as something that's very out there. But when it comes to adding that extra like little bit to it, to the onlooker, that looks like something that would be like a mental health thing. I know me and you know better, but as a whole, you know, if someone outside is looking in and you're trying to like say to your grandmother, some dude down the street trying to educate the population, it doesn't look very good. And I get that that's not what it is, because that happens even with psychology. If I'm talking about like social psychology or comparative or another discipline, the first thing that most people associate psychology with is mental illness, which again is wrong there as well, because there's many different avenues. But unfortunately, because of stigma and how mental health and things have been historically in the world, that's just kind of how it is. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but that's kind of like that association, and it kind of sucks. It really does.
Yeah, but once again, this is a very, especially honestly for the past 10 years, especially since we as a community moved from forums to conventional social media, this is a question I've seen come up more times than not. Because people have wanted to coin new terms to better describe large umbrella situations. Sorry, I've lost my words to a certain extent, so I'll try to keep this one short.
It's okay, I understand.
It's not a this is gonna sound incredibly selfish, and I don't necessarily agree with what I'm saying here, but I can't think of any other way to put it right now. How do we push such a major change how do we push a major label change? Because I understand that the whole psychological thing, because I have felt this previously in the past, but not to any significant level until now. How exactly can we change one of the two biggest umbrella terms when it comes to identifying as ultra human? One of the
I-
two biggest, oldest, most recognized ones, especially in a community which is fairly heavily splintered. I would love to know the answer to this, because it would ultimately be a pushing factor to us being able to do a lot more than update antiquated labels.
I suppose you just have to push the labels. I mean, not push though. I guess encourage the label as much as you can and explain that,
Encouraging it.
and explain
Sorry.
why it's okay, and explaining why using said label would be good for the community, and just hoping it catches on. That's just
Whilst I fully understand that, it's not as straightforward as that, because I'm not talking from like the whole psychological thing specifically, but from other matters similar to labels and types of labels that has been attempted and it just doesn't work. And in worst case scenarios, it can actually cause a further rift. So another concern that comes up for me is, are we potentially finding ourselves at a point where we have to potentially balance the lesser of some evils? I mean, the answer is obvious as to what would be the more morally sound option, Sapphirus. But this has raised a lot more questions than what Sapphirus has spoken about has raised a lot more questions than answers, which is much appreciated, but also has, I guess, given me a bit of a perspective that we may be facing a crisis down the line if we don't find a way to deal with this in the next 5 or so years maximum, because with the way, to bring a bit of politics into this, the way things are moving on that side and the way our identity, my one specifically, mind you, because I don't really lean on the spiritual side of things, I lean literally on the mental side of things. So like the way that my identity is being weaponized to victimize what is effectively a much more vulnerable community, I do want to see change for the better, but I can't see it happening, which is regrettable for me to say. I'm not saying it's not worth trying. I just can't see it happening, and I think we need to figure out a way to do it.
yeah, I understand what you
And
mean.
and sooner than later. And I'm just gonna stop talking now, but I hope I got my point across.
It was good. I think you definitely brought up some good points, and I don't have all the answers. I feel like some people here are thinking that I have all the answers.
No.
I don't. I'm just here
I
to
would-
cause a ruckus a little bit.
I would sincerely hope that we are all mature enough here to know that nobody truly has all of all of the answers. You may have some more answers compared to basically all of us, but definitely nowhere close to all of them, which is totally fine. Which is ultimately why we need more professionals we need more people with your type of retinue to weigh in on this. We need we effectively need a board meeting
That would be
consisting of qualified professionals.
that would be pretty chill. It's hard too because I don't feel like even if you're taking people who have that psychological background, I don't know if they take it as seriously as I do. Not to toot my own horn, but I like to be clinical. I like to leave no stone unturned. I'm very big on like empirical things and not getting my feelings mixed up with the cases at large. And that's mostly because when you're helping people in my capacity, you cannot let your own feelings get in the way of the clinical work that you do, or else it doesn't end well. And that's something that's very hard for a lot of practitioners and such to balance. And there are people who are just like totally out of touch, that have no idea the kind of clientele they're serving, and it's a whole thing. So it's very difficult to find people who are decent on the thing to be
For
on top
sure.
of that.
For sure.
There is something I did want to mention a little bit, and Luna, I might need you to weigh in a little bit here. It looks like Moss said something very interesting, that it looks like they might have some sort of neurodiverse or mental illness that is equated with their draconity, where it's hand in hand.
Sorry, which I would like to butt in is very, very similar to how I perceive my own experience of it as a form of neurodiversity. But with that, please continue.
It seems like if it comes to that, it's very interesting to think about. But I have to go back to when I talk about mental illness, and I'm not just saying, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. And I know, Luna, I kind of want you to weigh in a little bit, because in some ways you're also the same way. I know what you said, that you have clinical lycanthropy, which is different from being otherkind, but it's got a lot of like bits in it, I guess.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
And this is where I feel like it gets a little muddy when you start to put like adding the mental equation and putting that with your draconity, because then we have to kind of see if this is something that can be treated as an illness or a neurodiverse thing. Either way, if you're neurodiverse or suffering from a mental illness, there are ways to treat those things to get better and to be a more healthier individual. I almost feel that it's a little dangerous to be messing around with that a bit, because then it's like it is something that is not really almost on the other kin spectrum. It's more mental health and things related, and that stuff is a thing to be treated. And that, I don't know, it feels interesting to me if you're doing that, and that would almost say that this is a problem in some fashion, which it's not. Being otherkind is not a problem.
Well, being autistic is not a problem either, but it is a form of neurodivergency.
Okay.
Not okay. So like, there are things that can hinder your daily life that is not applicable to you living things well. I'm not saying that like being autistic or things is an issue, but there are hurdles that you have to deal with. That's frustrating. That makes it difficult for you to kind of get along in your general environment, I would suppose. I know for me, that's an issue as well with my mental illness and the fact that I have a severe learning disability, that it's not the best. I'm not a broken person, but it's something that I need more support for, so I can be more together. And with adding other kinism to that, I'm not sure if that's extremely wise. You know?
Otherkinism can affect people's ability to function. It can also not affect people's ability to function, but you can like. I guess what I'm trying to like say is that even if you have some form of like, for example, clinical lycanthropy, that wouldn't necessarily mean that you can't identify as alterhuman because you have clinical lycanthropy. And maybe I'm just misunderstanding what's being said at all, but I don't think it's really that bad to like have the both of them coexist at the same time. It's just really like the worry of how the world is going to treat it.
So I don't have clinical lycanthropy. So Luna, if you'd like to add a little more insight on that. I'm just kind of adding how it's like you don't want to make other kinism into something that it shouldn't be. You don't want to have those labels with it, I feel, because that just makes it seem that it's more of like an issue than what it is. I'm trying really hard to like fix my words here, but my brain is not at the capacity.
It's okay. I think I understand what you're saying. For
Right.
my being, my clinical lycanthropy is it's always a negative thing. Like there's really no positives to my clinical lycanthropy because one, it only appears during severe emotional distress or during severe severe psychotic distress, though also because it's something that can harm my being if it gets too severe. In those moments, my clinical lycanthropy revolves around experiencing the delusions of either turning into a werewolf or being physically a werewolf in those kind of moments. And I definitely don't want to conflate my clinical lycanthropy with my werewolf stereotype because one, they're two different things. One's harmful and one isn't. One is based in mental illness and one isn't. And two, it's just there's different things, and clinical lycanthropy is not a pleasant experience for my being, and I definitely don't want to conflate it with my werewolf identity because it's just not a pleasant thing, and it's not the same thing.
That's kind of it. I also think about like if you're trying to describe it to a population at large and also trying to get other people to understand what we're here and what we're about. You don't want this to become something that's relating to the stuff that I deal with, you don't want to have that stigma with this. And
Yeah.
I feel like when you start doing that stuff, you're gonna have that stigma with this. And I'm telling you, you do not want that.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I don't think anyone wants to have their identity be associated with the negative aspects of either neurodivergency or mental disorders. Like no one wants to I I would say connect the negative sides of like neurodivergency or mental illness with otherkinity, if I'm understanding correctly, or if I'm saying something, if I'm making any sense at all.
That's about right. And then when you do, my other worry is that, you're gonna go to a professional, not just me, but like a literal professional. And if you mention these things, they're gonna treat you like it's an issue.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
and
Like
they're not gonna have that understanding I do.
if I mentioned my clinical lycanthropy to a medical professional while describing my werewolf stereotype, I am almost certain that medical professional is going to conflate my werewolf stereotype with my clinical lycanthropy, even though I separate the two very well.
Exactly. And I think that's more of like a cautionary thing because I know how it seems when people go in and they talk about things to professionals that it's very different and they're looking at it through a very stringent lens. And I want to encourage everybody to get help if they need it, but if you're doing that, you're walking a very like fine line, and I worry what would happen if the wrong clinician gets the wrong idea about things, you know?
Oh
Um,
yes. Oh yeah,
and-
definitely.
Yeah.
And that's another way I'm coming about this is that because I know what it's like to be up there, and when you get evaluated for all kinds of things, that's something that they're going to look at. And then my other thought is like, what if this is something that does need to be treated? Is it fair to put that otherkin label on it for yourself when it's something that does cause amount of stress that does need to be treated? Whether
Yeah,
it's neurodivergency or mental illness, which I do encourage everyone to get assistance for to help so they can feel better. But then what are we looking at here? Is being otherkin just something that can be treated? Is it just another something that you put in the DSM?
yeah, I understand what you mean. I think my clinical lycanthropy can fall under otherkin sometimes, though I definitely do not want to associate my clinical lycanthropy with otherkin because clinical lycanthropy is a very harmful thing for my being. And again, I don't want to conflate my werewolf stereotype with otherkinity. Yeah. And the reason I almost never talk about clinical lycanthropy is because most people would probably assume that my werewolf stereotype is just influenced by my clinical lycanthropy. So I don't talk about it that much because I run the risk of having people associate my clinical lycanthropy with my otherkinity, and I don't want that because clinical lycanthropy is very much not a pleasant experience for my being.
I
can
suppose
never
all
imagine.
oh, sorry.
And that's okay, you can go.
I suppose all we can really do is try to make sure that like otherkinity is understood in the future. Because I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but hiding all the bad parts of otherkinity or like uh, I don't know, just being very, very cautious with the outside world when it comes to showing these parts can also be harmful. So that's why I'm like having a little bit of a hard time understanding exactly what's being said. But yeah, that's about it.
I
Uh,
you can go, Nimbus.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say that I am with Kina. I'm also having a little bit of a hard time kind of understanding things. After you speak, is it okay if I put my own input in as someone who is as someone whose theoryantropy is caused by autism? Is it okay if I put my input
Yeah,
in?
go ahead.
Like after you speak.
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Uh, I guess my last point that I wanted to do is that I don't want this to end up in the DSM. Does anyone know what the DSM is? Still of hands.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Well aware.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Okay, people know what the DSM is. That's awesome. I love you guys. And the DSM has a myriad of different things in it. It's not just mental illness, it's other things that are neurodiverse. You can find ADHD in there, you can find autism in there, you can find all kinds of wonderful things. TBIs too, which is pretty cool, as well as other more rare things like trichotillomania or that one sleep disorder that if you don't sleep, they die. I can't remember the name of that off the top of my head. But it's all in there. And it's clinical. It's something that we use to help us diagnose people with the aforementioned issues, I suppose, and then being able to direct them to support and to help and do all that wonderful things. The World Health Organization has its own book. I believe they have a lot of similar terms, if not more terms than just the DSM, which the rest of the world uses, which is pretty cool. But my thing is, I guess what I don't want to see is I don't want us to be put in that book because it's not something to be treated as something. And I'm not saying anything to step on like, well, if you have a neurodivergency, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be proud of it and stuff. That's fine. You can. That's great. I want you guys to be happy with who you are and being proud of who you are and things like that. But I'm looking at it not through like saying that anything's wrong or anything, but in the scientific way, there's something that is not connected right in your brain that is caused some issue in the past or causes other issues that prevent you from doing certain things that other people would do. And that's why that's in the DSM, and that's why there's a list of people that are around to help you and support you and places you can go to and things like that. And that's kind of what I mean is that I don't think being otherkin should be there because it doesn't need that.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I have to like leave in 7 minutes, so I'm gonna kind of wrap up my part or wrap up the panel because this has been going on for like 30 minutes over time, which is not a bad thing, though. I know everyone has things to do and I have things to do and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely agree with some of what you're saying, and I do appreciate you providing your viewpoint. I think it's important to have different perspectives brought to the table and discussed. I, as someone who has schizoaffective disorder, I probably don't want to see otherkinity in the DSM either, mainly because how do I describe it? Like schizoaffective, it's uh, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here right now. Yeah, I also hate. I also don't really like psychiatry as an institution. Like, I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. I'm so sorry, though.
It's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, I probably just don't. I probably don't want to see otherkin in the DSM either, mainly because a lot of medical professionals sometimes see otherkinity as just a mental illness. So, and if otherkinity was in the DSM, people would maybe start to get the idea that, oh, I know no one was suggesting it. It was just, yeah, I know no one was suggesting to put otherkinity in the DSM. It's just if it was ever a possibility, I don't
My thought
necessarily think I feel
process is
right on
that's
it.
where it's gonna head if you keep like if it gets associated with that. That's my point. And if it gets out to the greater populace at large, that's where it's gonna go. I'm not telling you to scare you. I'm not telling you as a warning. I just know how this works.
Oh, so
And
I
if
understand
it,
what you mean.
that's it. I'm not here to do stuff. I'm just giving you informed information about what's going to go where and how it is perceived. And like
Yeah.
a part of it is also getting people to not stigmatize other kin. I would love to tell everyone under the sun what I am, but I know how they're going to look at me, and I don't want to be seen as like, oh, that's just another mentally ill thing, you know. Anyway,
Yeah,
go
I
on, Luna.
understand.
I stepped in a little bit.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry.
Mm.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, I've described otherkin to some people IRL, and they did not take it well. So
I think a lot of us have had those experiences. For everyone in the chat who's currently saying we should quote unquote fight the stigma and whatever else, everything else be damned. Now, I'm not too I have a few medical professionals in my family. I've read a bit about the DSM in general, which is also a guideline we somewhat follow here in Australia, if not fairly extensively. I'm not too certain about that, but
Oh, cool.
what you fail to understand is, some of you, with all due respect, what happens after something enters into the DSM is completely up to the mercy of whoever is setting that precedence. Given the stigma we already have, I can't imagine that turning out too well. Like many other things, I mean, medical research isn't always accurate. A lot of mental disorders have been conflated with other already present conditions, which has caused possibly decades of misdiagnoses. Would I be correct in saying that, Sapphires?
I'm sorry, repeat that. I was looking at my trail.
I beg your pardon.
Well,
I got distracted. Say that again.
Wait. I can't even remember. I can't even remember what I just said. All right. So, where
No,
did you stop hearing me?
don't-
Or
I understand what you said. You said that that anyone who enters otherkin at the DSM is it's kind of at the mercy of otherkin as a definition in the DSM is kind of at the mercy of whoever enters it into the DSM.
that and
It was
also
after that.
yeah, and that and also however it's decided to be handled is also up to the mercy of whoever is creating that it's at the mercy of whoever is creating that diagnosis. And there have been a lot of recorded instances where basically symptoms have been conflated with other symptoms, and there's been a routine misdiagnosis that has perhaps gone undetected for 30 or 40 years because that was just what was accepted. Would I be correct in saying that, Sapphirus?
Yeah, that's possible as well. You
Yeah.
don't want
But
muddle for that, you know.
yeah, my ultimate point is I like the whole gallant thing of pushing ahead regardless is not a wise approach to take. The clinical world doesn't really care for that kind of shit to a great extent. It is better not to chance it rather it is probably more appropriate that we find ways to fix our current way of operating.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I do have to kind of as much as I'm enjoying the conversation, I do have to step out. So would it be okay if I ended the panel here?
Yeah, I think we're okay. I gotta go to I gotta finish more bird stuff.
Yeah.
But I just want to end again. I'm just the canary in the cave mine right now. I'm just letting you guys know from my standpoint of working in the mental area and the things that I know, and I'm giving you information, and it's up to you what you want to do with it.
Yeah, I understand completely. I appreciate you providing your viewpoint. I understand that topics like this are kind of a hot button issue that can easily get heated or anxiety inducing. So I definitely appreciate everyone being civil and providing disagreements and agreements in the most respectful way possible. It's part of what I love about this community is that everyone is very mature with disagreements, new viewpoints, and the discussion of hot button topics in a respectful way. So thank you all for doing that. It is greatly appreciated, and I hope we can continue to have these kind of conversations in the future.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely have respect for a lot of what you've said here today, Zephyrus, and God, I had something else I wanted to comment, but it's totally gone, and I'm not going to drag on the panel by trying to recall it. So just
okay.
oh yes, yeah, that is actually sorry, like as soon as I said that. I think like this is a very idealistic vision, but this whole concept of I'm just gonna say quote unquote psychological identification probably should be a matter that a panel of unbiased professionals should look into, which I'm not saying it may even be possible because because research is prohibitively expensive and difficult to justify, but if that's an end goal that we can get to as a community to get some kind of solid research, because the only other qualified person in the mental health field that I've heard speaking about this was somebody who also identified and probably said a lot of things that weren't correct due to quasi severe bias. You obviously have your own biases respectfully, but you still you seem to be approaching this from a much more rational standpoint, which is always needed and appreciated.
No problem. I do have my own biases and thoughts and feelings on that, but I'm trying really hard to separate that from just advising the community at large about what goes on behind all these doors, and giving you a standpoint from someone who works in there, and giving you guys all that information. And that's what's important at the end of the day.
Precisely. And yeah, even though you do have your biases, it is, I'm not going to say this is a bad thing because it's certainly not, but it's very telling that you are one of the least biased voices I have heard on this topic. Now, it's very, very good that you chose to step up and speak. That's appreciated, but my point is, it may be a little bit damning if we have to consider yourself the least biased voice here. Again, your knowledge is much appreciated. It's definitely good, but we need to find neutral people who are willing to read about this and speak about this. Otherwise, we may end up finding ourselves going in circles about this.
That is the question. That is finding the right kind of people. It's extremely hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've said everything I wish to hear, so.
Yeah, that's understandable. Does anyone else want to provide some ending notes?
I would like to say I'm still very on the fence about this matter. I don't know. I'm very on the fence about this matter, and I'm just going to wait until I'm just going to do some more research and hear more arguments from both sides until I make up my mind on this matter. But I think all of the points presented here have been really good. And if we are ending this panel, I will be migrating to the voice chat to continue talking about draconity. So
you read my mind. I was just about to propose that for also anyone who may want to discuss this particular topic further, but let's try to keep any further follow-up short. I think we've said a lot about it here for now. When we hopefully do have an upcoming episode, I would like Zephyrus to be a guest speaker in it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if no one has anything else to add, then thank you all for attending the first episode of Close Encounters of the Dragonkind. We plan to continue this podcast in the Celestial Spire server, either on a bi-weekly or a monthly basis. And we would appreciate some suggestions for topics to discuss next in Spire and at future summits and whatnot. Thank you everyone for conversing, providing your opinions, and having civil discussions. I know some of what we talked about is a hot button topic, though I think discussing hot button topics like this in a civil way, providing different viewpoints and whatnot, is very, very important, and I really appreciate everyone's viewpoints and how everyone has been respectfully interacting, even if there have been some disagreements and different viewpoints provided. So again, it is much appreciated. I hope we can continue to have civil, respectful topics like this in the future. I'm very happy that this took place at the summit. And again, thank you all for being here, listening in, providing your viewpoints. And we will be having the Ring in the New Year voice chat whenever everyone wants to hop in. I think some are going to hop into the voice chat right after this panel. My partner Volantile is going to do his panel. Drac is going to do the D&D first session. And then we'll have a closing ceremonies later on. So again, thank you all for joining and listening in. And with that, I will stop yapping. Bye, y'all. Thank you again for a wonderful, respectful conversation. And
thank you for having us, bringing us together.
I would like to say, normally when talking about controversial things or debating stuff or any sort of conflict usually stresses me out really bad to the point where I can't function. But this has been very chill, and I have not been stressed out by this conversation, and I'm very surprised that and I'm glad that we were able to keep things respectful and stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's what I greatly appreciate about this community. Well, part of it. I appreciate a lot of things about this community, the Spyro community, the Summit community, though. Yep, it's one of the things I really appreciate about this community because I've never been able to find it anywhere else. So thank you all for being such awesome beings. It is much appreciated.
All right. See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Blim.